Before we get started, I wanted to thank you for your participation in the first of what I anticipate may be many opportunities to explore universal design as it is utilized here at Geisinger Commonwealth School of Medicine. If you have not yet completed the pre-work survey linked on the SharePoint page where this video is located, please stop this presentation now and do so. My hope is to collect data from you all before this presentation and the corresponding DME meeting, and again at a later date. This will help as we assess for current and ongoing needs. The number of students with disabilities in health science programs is increasing rapidly. Expanding the number of culturally competent professionals with disabilities in health sciences will broaden the knowledge base and breadth of experience within all fields, in addition to filling a critical shortage in the healthcare workforce. If we ignore the 1/5 of the population with a disability, we are inevitably missing a huge pool of talent for the future of medicine. The increased presence and perspectives of people with disabilities will influence the way professionals view disability and the assumptions associated with it. Moreover, professionals with disabilities can improve patient care, impact research agendas and workplace attitudes toward disability, and reduce the significant barriers to healthcare, discrimination, and ableism experienced by people with disabilities. An expansion of what the terms disability and diversity mean is a step in the right direction. When we truly embrace clinicians and students with disabilities, we improve understanding of disability, and that, in turn, has the potential to improve patient care. While people with physical or visible disabilities deal with a limited presence in medicine, there are many more students with invisible disabilities, such as psychiatric and learning disabilities, who feel uncomfortable being out. This silent suffering comes at a price. Recent studies suggest that an estimated 27.2% of medical students are depressed, and that 11.1% experience suicidal ideation. Additionally, 44.2% of medical students report experiencing burnout, and up to 65% experience clinically significant anxiety. If these mental health conditions are severe, cause functional limitations, and interfere with the student's ability to engage in the curriculum, classification of a disability might be appropriate, as well as academic accommodations. Disability is not reducible to a compliance issue. It's an aspect of identity for many students and an aspect of diversity on college campuses. In common with other marginalized populations, many students with disabilities identify with a culture rooted in a civil rights struggle. Often, when people hear the word disability, they think of someone who has difficulty walking, hearing, seeing, or speaking. But the reality among the 4.6% of medical students who disclose their disabilities is quite different. In fact, the vast majority of medical students with disabilities, about 92%, have non-apparent conditions such as ADHD, psychological disabilities, learning disabilities, and chronic health conditions. At Geisinger Commonwealth School of Medicine, between 7 and 11% of students in each class receive accessibility services. The good news here is that we are cultivating a culture where students feel comfortable seeking services for their disabilities. Disclosure of a disability status is higher than the national average and more along the lines of what we would hope to see. The World Health Organization's International Classification of Functioning Disability in Health indicates that a disability is, quote, a continuum relevant to the lives of all people to different degrees and at different times in their lives, end quote. It is considered a universal phenomenon and a natural feature of the human condition. One definition of disability from a social model is as follows. Disability is seen as a socially created problem. It is not an attribute of an individual, but rather a complex collection of conditions, many of which are created by the social environment. It is important to recognize that disabilities are heterogeneous, so much so that grouping all disabling conditions together is ultimately meaningless. Some disabling conditions are present at birth. Others occur suddenly, such as with serious injury or acute illness, which may resolve over time or persist until death. Some develop in middle age or later in life. Some conditions are stable over time, while others are more progressive in nature. On this slide, you will see a list of the 7 categories of disability, all of which are represented by medical students and doctors with disabilities. Learning disabilities are among the most common disability type among health science students, with one estimate suggesting that 21.5% of students with disabilities in medical school have a learning disability, and 33.7% of students with disabilities having attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Additionally, there are students who suffer from chronic disease or psychological diagnoses, such as major depressive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and the like. The diagnosis of a condition such as generalized anxiety disorder, ADHD, or chronic migraines does not necessarily mean that a person has a disability. The key here is the interplay between the diagnosis and the functional limitations that result from that diagnosis. A commitment to disability inclusion was exemplified by the U.S. Congress in the 2008 amendments to the ADA. In the ADA Amendments Act, the description of a disability was expanded to promote broad coverage for people with disabilities. What constitutes a major life activity was clarified to include a wide range of activities, including concentrating, communicating, and thinking. This clarification elucidated the range of conditions that may be understood as disabilities and warrant accommodations by post-secondary schools. A serious functional limitation means a reduction due to a severe physical or mental impairment to the degree that the individual requires services or accommodations not typically made for other students in order to prepare for, enter, engage in, or retain employment. You might be wondering why we are having this conversation if our accessibility services are effective in accommodating for various student needs. The reason is that while accommodations can help support students on a case-by-case basis, it is not the ideal modality of supporting a diverse group of students. Accommodations are sometimes effective in removing the social and environmental barriers, which is a step in the right direction. However, universal design challenges us to preemptively remove these barriers in order to lessen the need for accommodations and make the environment most accessible to the largest amount of diverse learners. This movement is more inclusive and is found to be the most consistent with the spirit of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Additionally, as we look to increase our support of students from underrepresented backgrounds, it is important to note that studies have shown that universally designed curriculum and learning improves access for students from racially and ethnically marginalized groups. Studies suggest that universal design in education supports international students, Indigenous students, and first-generation students as well. A separate study concluded that, in addition to supporting students with disabilities, universally designed instruction and assessment is also proven to support students with English as a second language, slow readers, and students from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds. It is important to see universal design in education as a lens rather than a checklist. It is a holistic approach to teaching and learning. Without going into a long history lesson, it is important to recognize the origin of universal design. The concept of universal design originated in architecture through the work of Ronald Mace, who aimed to design buildings that would be usable to the greatest extent possible by everyone, regardless of age, ability, or situation. There are often aspects of our environment that are universally designed without our awareness of such. Pictured on this slide, you'll see a few aspects of universal design that you may not even be aware were designed as such. On the left is a curb cut, a hallmark example of universal design that created access for individuals who vary in mobility to traverse the same path as everyone else. Next, there is a picture of a flat light switch, which allows individuals with different motor skills and abilities to easily turn on and off the lights. Finally pictured is a screenshot of the player controls on Netflix. Specifically, you'll see the playback speed feature highlighted. Whether or not people realize it, having this built into videos allows for greater access to the most amount of people, the principle of universal design. Just as universal design in architecture, like curb cuts, aims to make the environment most accessible to the greatest number of people, so too does universal design in instruction attempt to capture the breadth of diversity in learners. Previously, I spoke to some of the rationale for promoting universal design within our curriculum and beyond. Not only is it supportive to the greatest number of students, even beyond students with disabilities, and is in line with the spirit of the ADA, it is also more cost-effective. Several complaints have been filed with the Office for Civil Rights, OCR, by students in health science programs, indicating that university documents, learning management systems, library materials, classroom technologies, videos, and course registration systems were inaccessible. While resolutions were reached between the students and the schools, OCR investigations are time-consuming and costly. Beyond simply being compliant or avoiding unnecessary legal battles, we are working to provide a school that is most accessible and best serves the widest array of learners. We are a reactive culture and often tend to fix a problem rather than anticipate and plan for preventing it. A great example of this occurred during this academic year. Before the current academic year, no Geisinger student had disclosed deficits with hearing or auditory processing that required accommodations. Because we had not naturally incorporated captioning and transcripts into our curriculum, it required a challenging and expensive request to Panopto to have thousands of minutes of podcasts captioned at rapid speed. The goal here is to support both our students with a diverse set of needs and our faculty, who would benefit from a well-organized structure around how to meet these needs. I want to take a few moments to congratulate you on your efforts, which are clear and intentional when it comes to incorporating the principles of universal design into the curriculum. Research outlines many tools faculty can utilize to improve access, including course mapping and thorough structured syllabi. Much work is put into tying course content to learning objectives, which is proven to support learning and assist students that require stronger organization in classes. Universal design in instruction also requires multiple means of representation or learning modalities to meet the diverse needs of students. At Geisinger, this is happening by presenting and reinforcing content through podcasts, active learning sessions, case-based learning, clinical skills sessions, and community immersion, just to name a few. The flipped classroom model of instruction allows focus to be on engagement in the higher order cognition, such as case-based learning, and lends itself to universal design. Still, there are some limits to the problem-based learning or flipped classroom models. The first of these are limitations for students who have challenges with processing or real-time note-taking. One way to universally address this barrier is to assign a note-taker for each group. In terms of accommodations, a live scribe pen could assist. Additionally, having appropriate scaffolding for sessions can address possible barriers. Still, there is progress to be made, and this should be done in joint effort. Staff, along with faculty and students, should be working together to assess for accessibility. Research has found that faculty play an integral role in the success of students with disabilities, particularly in the areas of design and delivery of instruction in their courses, direct interactions with students with disabilities around issues pertaining to student disclosure and accommodation requests, mentoring and relationships with individual students, knowledge of campus services and supports available for students with disabilities, and influence on the overall climate of the institution. This is why you are all key stakeholders in these efforts. Not only are you creating the course content, but you are spending the most amount of time with the most amount of students. Ultimately, the goal of this presentation is to start the conversation. I want to shed light on what's to come. On November 17th, I will be asking you all to look deeper at our strengths and areas for growth in the realm of accessibility. Additionally, I will be happy to answer any questions you all may have from this presentation. We will also walk you through plans for the future to improve our accessibility efforts. More than anything, I want you to recognize that this is a journey we are embarking on as a collaborative team. Perfect accessibility, while ideal, is not what we expect. Instead, we will take an intentional and piecemealed approach that is manageable for everyone and moves us in the right direction. Here are the citations for the research and data utilized in this presentation. I deeply appreciate your time and consideration and look forward to our continued work together. Thank you.